And I said to the teacher, look, I can do this, but I can't hear what I'm writing. Can you teach me how to hear what I'm putting down on the paper? And the teacher laughed and said, well, you either can or you can't. When the university approached me, said, we need an aural teacher. We've had a crisis. The head of music knows a bit about my musical journey. I worked in the industry as a session musician mainly, playing jazz mostly. And then currently, I'm lecturing at Vitz. By the end of my degree, I could look flashy and look like I knew what I was doing, but I was playing maths. I wasn't really playing music. So I thought, I'm going to retrain myself. I ordered an ear training course by a guy called David Lucas Burge, and I thought it would help. It's like, here's the interval, identify it. And it would be like flipping intervals and changing, and it's that fast. And I could do all of that. Chord qualities, all that stuff. And I got really, really good at it. At the end of that course, you have to transcribe the Star Spangled Banner, the anthem. And I couldn't do it. I mean, I was obviously frustrated because I knew how good I'd gotten at that. I would hear something and try to play it, and then it would be wrong 9 times out of 10. And then, of course, I came across you. And then things started changing quite quickly to the point that now, like, simple pop stuff is really easy. I can, like, transcribe it pretty much immediately. My improvising has changed completely, and I can pre-hear melodies and improvise according to them. When you perceive sound like this, it's like you haven't really seen colors before. 2 people in the same class had the same amount of time, the same training, and the one was like could not pitch match accurately. It has changed that much in a very, very short space of time. And as soon as they hit a moment that they can't recognize the note, they jump back into their old thinking strategies. So what interval was that?
Even though we have a specific thinking strategy to adopt, for example, in the case of the melodic dictation.
Before we jump into the full interview with Daniel, I want to take a moment to address something important. What you're about to hear may be hard to believe for some of you, and I get it. It goes against what traditional ear training has been for the past 100 years. So to all the skeptics out there, I don't blame you. I'm a skeptic myself, and I completely understand. And just to be upfront, I know there will be comments below, like we've seen in other videos, saying we're just making this up or trying to scam people. Let me be absolutely clear. We have nothing to hide. In fact, we would welcome the opportunity to conduct a rigorous scientific study directly comparing our method with a traditional interval-based approach endorsed by many musicians, including well-known figures like Rick Beato and others. We'd be happy to work with independent researchers to test both methods on real students, track their progress over time, and evaluate the outcomes based on how well they can recognize and understand real music. So if you're tempted to leave angry comments below, I invite you to take this action instead. Reach out to your favorite musician or YouTuber who promotes interval-based ear training. Tell them, look, they're willing to test this head-to-head. Why not take the challenge? Because at the end of the day, our mission is simple: to empower every musician to develop a great ear that allows them to improvise, compose directly from their imagination, recognize notes and chords in real time, and so on. The only way to achieve that mission is by facing the truth, honestly investigating what works and what doesn't. We have zero interest in pretending something works if it doesn't. That would help no one, and it would betray the mission we care so deeply about. So that's what I wanted to share before you watch this conversation with Daniel. I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, please hit like and subscribe.
Let's start simple. And the first question would be, what's your story as a musician? How did it all begin? What's your main instrument? What kind of training or education have you had along the way?
Okay, well, I grew up in a household that had music in it. My dad is a fine artist, actually a painter, but he plays the piano very well. by sort of international measuring scales. He's about a licentiate level pianist. Never went pro, never tried to, probably could have. He actually bought a grand piano before he bought a car, for instance. And in South Africa, having a car is a necessity because we don't have such great public transport. So as a very young man, 19 years old, he actually bought a piano and didn't have any way to store it, and actually ended up having to store this piano under the church square in the city Pretoria where I grew up, which is like the central square. There was a basement, and he would go and play the piano in the basement. So naturally, when I came along many years later, there was this grand piano in the house. He still has the same grand piano. He's an 80-something-year-old man now, still plays the piano every day for probably 2 to 3 hours a day, just for his own enjoyment. And so I grew up in a household that had a piano going on all the time. I have lots of memories of lying under the piano, which might not have been so good for my ears, but I seem to be okay. And listening to classical music. So he's a classical pianist. And so naturally there was going to be an interest. I have another memory of being quite young, we actually ended up having 2 pianos in the house. There was an upright piano and then the grand piano. And I remember standing at the upright piano because I wasn't allowed to touch the grand piano, and trying to like pitch match the notes on that piano, on that upright piano, not thinking about it in any way other than just, I want to make my voice sound as exactly as I can like that piano sound, and how close can I get? And I was little. I must have been about 4 years old, 5 years old, something like that at that point when I was playing around with it. So it started there. I sang in some choirs. I forced my way into the school choir about 2 years before I would have been allowed in the school choir, when I was about 8 years old. And they would only take 10-year-old children to sing in the choir. And they said I could do an audition, and then I did the audition, and then they let me sing in the school choir. And then I did an audition for a regional choir, which was obviously on a higher level, about 2 years later. And I got into that, and that was a nice choir that actually toured Europe as well as performing around South Africa. So that was quite strong musical foundation stuff. And I always liked music at school when we did class music and those sort of things. I enjoyed that. And then when I was about 10, I think I was 10, it was time to start taking official piano lessons, which I know by today's standards is probably quite late, but I'd obviously pushed enough that my parents thought, okay, maybe he's serious. Maybe we should let him take piano lessons. So I started piano lessons. Then in high school, I did music as a subject. And then I went and studied at what was then a technikon and turned into a university, and did a degree there, music degree. Then worked in the industry as a session musician mainly, playing jazz mostly, but sometimes playing pop and sometimes doing studio gigs, recordings, those sorts of things. I always was educating along the way as well. Probably since I was about 20, I started giving lessons already very, very early on. And then played lots of gigs, basically survived off of playing gigs and a little bit of teaching for most of my career. And then went off to the UK for a little bit. Thought I'd go and study overseas. I was trying to study either in Holland or in Canada. Eventually I did get into the schools in Canada, but then visas and things got denied for all sorts of reasons, and ended up back here, and then decided to do a master's. I'd met a very special musician who's inspired me quite a lot, a guy called Malcolm Bruff. And so I studied his stuff and wanted a formal way to study it and to consolidate it. So then I did a master's degree at Vitz University, and then started lecturing there while I was doing the degree in various ways, taking ensembles and teaching piano and those kinds of things. And so I've sort of been in education and gigging, and then more recently probably for the last, I don't know, 10 years, maybe a bit more. I've been writing more original music, and I'm trying to go more in that direction and leave the studio musician / session musician thing behind a little bit more right now, and also keeping the educator thing going. And then currently, I'm lecturing at Vitz, and I'm teaching at a private school, and I have this amazing home studio. So I teach here, and I teach Alexander Technique here as well. So I trained to be an Alexander Technique teacher also in the last 10 years. So yeah, that's my story.
Great. Yeah, that's amazing. So you mentioned Malcolm Bruff. Is it the right name?
Malcolm Bruff, yeah.
Would you want to talk a little bit more about what you found inspiring about him, about his stuff?
I mean, first and foremost, I think the man is an absolute genius. He's an interesting free spirit type human being who I was at a local festival. It was called the Grahamstown Festival. It's the Makanda Festival now. And I remember a piano making a lot of noise in the background somewhere coming out of one of the practice rooms, and thinking, man, what is that noise? And I really thought this person was just playing a lot of noise. I really didn't understand what was going on. And then he was one of the performers that was one of the headlining performers of the festival. So I ended up watching a concert, and I realized, wow, there's something going on here. And he played the noisy thing, which then was not so noisy in the concert, because obviously it was in the place it needed to be. And I realized that I didn't really know what he was up to. It was one of those moments where you've had years of playing and years of education and theory and all this stuff, and then you meet this musician who just is doing things that you had never even thought possible. And it turns out he's actually very influential in the rhythm world in Switzerland. So he's a Swiss-based musician, teaching at the Basel Conservatory. And I went to a lot of workshops with him during that festival, and then collaborated with him later on, trying to get connections between Vitz University and Basel, which they also had some other connections, so we were strengthening that. And basically I studied him and his approach to rhythm. And also other things became very clear, like related to you and your course. He is a musician who grew up gospel and hears things by ear. And I remember one conversation where we were talking about harmonies, and you're saying, jazz harmony is sort of five-ish. Everything resolves in perfect fifths. And pop harmony is more four-ish. And that's kind of stuck with me, because now I wasn't experiencing that at the time of that conversation, but now with looking at your training, I get very much the sensations of like four-ish is like far-ish, which is sort of that chord's flavor and things related to that. So yeah, he was a very inspirational musician for me, and I hope to still talk to him more later and hang out with him and learn more stuff as we go.
Great. So since you touched about your training, let's talk about it. Can you walk us through your own experience with your training over the years, and like what approaches have you tried, what challenges or frustration you faced, and how your thinking has evolved?
Sure. So as a little kid, I was aware that I was already hearing music in my mind beyond the normal sort of earworm looping melodies that I would sometimes wake up from sleeping and it'd be like, whoa, okay, I'm hearing some sort of orchestral thing or something like that. But I had absolutely no access to that. And I was aware that the teachers around me would say that I was musical. You know, if people interacted with me, they'd say, oh yeah, no, he's musical, and obviously was singing in tune and all of that already. But when I started my formal training, and then at high school, we had to do quite a lot of theory. We had to do 4-part writing, harmonic writing. And I remember a particular incident where I'd gotten really good at the maths of 4-part harmony writing. And, you know, I could write exactly the right thing with no parallel fifths and all the things that they want you to pay attention to. And I said to the teacher, look, I can do this. I can do your maths, but I can't hear what I'm writing. I don't know what I'm putting down on the paper. Can you teach me how to hear what I'm putting down on the paper? And the teacher laughed and said, well, you either can or you can't. And that was the answer. It's like, we can't teach you to do that. You either can or you can't. And so that was probably the first frustration. And at that time, we were doing the traditional, I don't know, it would probably be the British Royal Schools year training. You have to recognize cadences like 5-1, 4-1, 5-6, interrupted, perfect, all of those sorts of cadences. We did have to do a little bit of intervals. So you had to recognize like fifths and fourths and those sorts of things. We had to try to write down some basic melodies and some basic rhythms. So probably the standard thing. And we were, how old was I? I was like 14, 15, 16. We were expected to do that sort of stuff. And I was fine at that. There was like no real problem. I could do it, but I was using whatever strategies you could in the moment. And then I got to varsity, so first year, and I knew that I'd now done this other training, but there was no connection between what I could imagine and what I could physically play or physically write down. Like, I'm still not hearing anything that I'm writing down. I'm still not able to imagine something and know what to play. There was just, they're different worlds. And at university, I thought it would get better, but it got worse. It's like the theory got more and the music got less. So I got really good at understanding I'm supposed to use this chord scale over that kind of chord, and there are these kinds of voicings in fourths and upper structure triads and all this stuff that you're supposed to get good at. And I practiced because I was very serious about getting as good as I could. And we had an aural course there, which in retrospect, like now, I think if it had been taught differently, it would have been a very good aural course. And I remember there being a trumpet student. Can't remember his name offhand now. But this guy was like really great. And I said to him, like, how are you able to improvise like that? How are you able to deal with this stuff? And he said to me at that point, no, it's the aural training that he's been doing at the university. He was about 2 years ahead of me. And the aural training used solfege. So we had to sight sing melodies using solfege. And we would slowly increase how we did the solfege. So it would start with all scale steps, and then they would introduce chord 1 as arpeggios, and then they would introduce chord 5. And we didn't work so far through it. I think everybody found the course actually difficult to engage with, because it would literally be, here's a piece of paper, and there's the melody, and now you got to read that melody, and you got to sing it correctly, and you're going to use solfege syllables to do it. So we had no grounding. We didn't know what solfege syllables were. You quickly learned those, and then you were supposed to apply it straight away. We still did intervals as well. We had to recognize fourths and fifths and all those things. Chord qualities, major, minor, diminished, augmented, sevenths, ninths, all that stuff that is kind of typical. And one develops strategies. Like, I got really good at the strategies. We had 2 years of that training. So I graduated with, I think, about 95% for that subject. And so you would think, okay, cool, that's you've done well at your aural thing. But actually, I just done really well at the university's aural course, and I hadn't developed the aural skills that you actually need. And I knew that because I still wasn't at the point where I could take a basic nursery rhyme that I could sing very easily, and I could just sit down at the piano and play it instantly. I'd have to work it out. So I'd have to compare what I'm hearing in my mind and try the notes, find the right notes, memorize it like theoretically, think about it theoretically in order to be able to play it. So I thought it's not good.
Sorry for interrupt you. I just have one question. When you say about you develop strategies, you mean that you develop like sort of workarounds to get the exercise right? Is that what you mean, or do you mean something else?
Yeah, exactly. So I got I could recognize chord qualities by themselves because I was a pianist, so I spent time with the chord qualities. So I would spend time listening to them, trying to arpeggiate them, and then that became something that became internalized enough that if I heard a chord, I could pick out the notes and then sing the notes and then work out, oh, I just heard a major triad, or I just heard a diminished chord, or something like that. Because I was familiar with cadences, some cadences were easier, obviously, to hear. We didn't really train in chord progressions as such. For the sight singing, we had the documents they would test us on. So you go and you just practice it by rote. So you're singing the syllables mean nothing, but you sing the syllables as they are written down there, and you memorize the melody, and so then you can do quite well. There are a lot of examples, so you had to work hard to get all of those examples internalized. Same, we had to do rhythm stuff there. We had to clap rhythms while and sing them while conducting with a hand, which I think is quite a standard thing as well. And that actually helped. That helped quite a lot with my rhythm. So I was using ways like use intervals, try to use arpeggios that you might know. You find ways to theoretically work out what you're hearing, basically.
Okay, but your skills weren't intuitive and ready, fast and intuitive enough to be applied in real music, or to transcribe a melody or a song very quickly and easily just by ear. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, the way it worked was obviously you would hear a melody many times, and they'd give you a lot of time to work it out. And my musical memory was good enough that I could hear a melody and remember it quite well at that point. But I mean, by the end of the training, it was almost like I was further away from music. By the end of my degree, I could look flashy and look like I knew what I was doing, but I was playing maths. I wasn't really playing music. It didn't feel like when I was a child and I was playing the simplest, I don't know, blues thing and improvising, and I knew nothing about improvising and nothing about blues, but that felt really good. And after 4 years of really intense training where we all worked really hard, it kind of didn't get anywhere. And it also became quite clear, I had a theater gig straight after my degree. And I had to play very simple pieces of music compared to what I had been playing at university, like harmonically very simple and rhythmically very simple compared to what I had to play. But it had to be right. It had to groove. You had to play not fancy voicings and things. You had to play simple voicings in the right place at the right time with the right inflection. And I couldn't do it. And I'd done really well at my degree, but I couldn't play Hero, for instance. I couldn't play 4 straight quarter notes beautifully in a basic C major root position. It was that was hard for me. So on many levels, I'd gotten really good and really bad through my training. And I think I realized that at the time. I started learning simple chords at that point. I thought, I'm going to retrain myself. I ordered an ear training course from America by a guy called David Lucas Burge. I'm not sure if it's still around, but probably, I don't know. It still arrived in CDs. I've still got the CDs here somewhere. And there was a perfect pitch course and a relative pitch course. And I thought, that's great. And I'm going to work my way through this. And I thought it would help. And I remember having a conversation with one particular musician in the South African industry who really questioned me. He really said to me, why the hell why do you care about this? Why is this important to you? Why don't you just play music? Why do you want to train your ears? What's this going to mean? And I couldn't really answer him. I just had this feeling that this was important and I need to do this. And so I said to him, well, I'd like to get to a point where I can hear music and know what it is and play it straight away. If I'm playing in a band situation, at this point, I thought it's impossible that you now can actually hear it and play it straight. But I thought it would be nice, as a band musician, to be able to hear what the other guys are doing better and then be able to fit into the whole thing better. That was probably the main motivator at that point, which isn't even such a strong motivator, but I really wanted to be a really good musician. And so I started working on this David Lucas Burge course. I probably spent some days an hour, some days 45 minutes. On a bad day, I'd spend 30 minutes practicing that stuff. And I practiced it for years, like 2-3 years. And I got incredibly good at it. Like the exercises made my university training look like a complete joke. And like you would get interval stuff like this at university. Identify the interval. And then they'd play it for you. They play it like 5 times or 6 times, and to give you lots of time to kind of get it right. And in the David Lucas Burge course, it's like, here's the interval, identify it. And it would be like flipping intervals and changing, and it's that fast. And you just have to label them one after the time, or one after the other. There's like no time to think. And I could do all of that. I finished the relative pitch course. I finished it. I finished like, you have to identify chords where they have like inversions of chords and they play like 5 notes and you have to hear which note is where. So you have to say, oh, the third's at the bottom, then it's the root, then it goes to the 5th, mostly around triads, augmented, diminished, major, minor triads, like you name it, chord qualities, all that stuff, fast, slow. And I got really, really good at it. And I realized I still couldn't, because at the end of that course, you have to transcribe the Star Spangled Banner, the American song, the anthem. So you have to transcribe that. And I couldn't do it. And I thought, I've spent years doing this thing, and I still need to sit at a piano in order to transcribe this piece of music. And like as a working musician, I was transcribing music anyway. Like I'd bought Transcribe, the program at that point, and I was using it. And I was trying to do it without slowing things down too much, only using the program to slow things down or loop things when I really needed to. So I was spending a lot of time, so much so that other musicians would come to me and ask me to transcribe stuff for them, for like their exams and things like that. So, which actually, if I think back when I was in my last year of high school, I had to pay somebody to transcribe something for me. So obviously something had changed. I'd obviously gotten a little better, but I still couldn't transcribe the Star Spangled Banner, which is not actually such a complicated melody if one thinks about it.
We're saying that you weren't able to transcribe the song by ear alone. You needed the instrument.
I needed an instrument. Yeah, exactly.
And so basically you're saying that you got to the maximum level possible at interval recognition, but you still had to rely on the instrument to recognize what was happening in a basic song, because as far as I can remember, that's a basic song in one key, if I'm correct. So there's not a lot of stuff going on, right?
No. And you were expected to use the interval training that you'd done to be able to recognize the notes between as you went. And I mean, I was obviously frustrated because I knew how good I'd gotten at doing that. Like I was really good. I don't know if I'm still that good at it. Probably if I spent 2-3 days doing it, I would recognize intervals that fast again. But yeah, I was like really, really, really good at it, and really frustrated because I still couldn't take a simple nursery rhyme or a melody that is essentially stepwise major and a couple of arpeggios and things, and I couldn't work it out.
Wow.
I definitely couldn't do any modulations or anything like that. I mean, that just wasn't possible. And still hearing music in your mind, like playing a lot of jazz and getting frustrated because I would hear something and know what I want and try to play it, and then it would be wrong 9 times out of 10. It would be like almost right. It would be kind of close, but not really, The rhythm would be also kind of close, but not really. So that period was like, it really showed me a lot of weaknesses. Like rhythmically, I was weak. And even as a young child, I remember, maybe not so young, maybe like 15 years old, I was sitting waiting for a bus, and I was trying to tap out 2 against 3. I had no idea that that's what I was doing. It was just a rhythm that I was trying to figure out and work on this thing. Like, this is cool. This feels cool. What is this? And then getting it right, and then working on like 4 against 3. But before I had the knowledge of what I was really doing. And I remember getting to university, and I had a singing teacher, and she said, "So tell me about you and show me some stuff rhythmically." And I showed her that was something I'd played around with. And I remember her reaction being like quite impressed, being like, "Wow, we don't usually get students that can do that." And I'd gone from that in 4 years of training to not being able to play 4 quarter notes or hear a melody and play a simple Bar Bar Black Sheep or something simple. Like what had happened? Something had gone wrong, I thought. And again, I think the aural course would have been very good if certain things had been put in place at the right time, and if we'd been shown what was important and how it would help us. And maybe if we weren't taught all the super advanced stuff before we were ready for the super advanced stuff. I think maybe I wasn't ready for the university course I did. Maybe that's what happened.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, based on my experience, I can just do nothing else than say that's absolutely right. So, but yeah, then how things evolve?
Yeah, so I finished the David Lucas Burge course, and then thought, okay, I've got to still work on this because I clearly don't know. I looked for other courses. There was another course I found, I can't remember, but it was very similar to the David Lucas Burge. I couldn't immediately do everything because the structure of the course was slightly different, but I was working really quickly through it. And then I looked at the course content and I realized this is not going to do anything different. It's exactly the same course, basically. And then later, probably about a year later, I came across Melodia. And Melodia was the first thing that was doing something different. This is like a subscription website thing that I started working on. And something shifted when I did Melodia. Something was clear. They work very much on basic sensations to begin with. So they'll start with like, is there a lot of sound or is there only one sound? And then they'll play like cluster chords or a single note. They'll play sounds high, play sounds low. They'll do things like that. And get you to basically refine your ear down to the point that you can tell, okay, I'm hearing 3 notes or I'm hearing 1 note. And I worked probably for about 2 years, maybe even, no, it was longer. It was probably 2 to 3 years on that course. There were periods that I would spend like an hour and a half to 2 hours a day working on that stuff. And there were other times that I'd spend like 45 minutes or on a bad day, 15 minutes practicing that stuff. So I was like very serious about getting good at this.
What was the level at the end of the training, like with Melodia?
I think I'd gotten to a point where I knew what I didn't know. Whereas before, I knew there was something I didn't know. And now I'd gotten to the point where it was like, okay, I realize that what I don't know is this sensation stuff. Or there is something around sensation and hearing music from a different perspective that's not clear. I don't know what that is. And so, I was at this point doing the master's degree. I'd already started the master's degree. I'd also started looking really heavily at my own rhythmic problems and things I wanted to solve in my own playing, and using the Malcolm Bruff's stuff and using the rhythm theory stuff that I'd come across in my master's and was looking at to try and address that. So I was trying to address these two, what I felt were like really big holes, like there's rhythm stuff and there's sensation pitch stuff that's missing. And I remember a particular incident where I was sitting at the piano being very simple and playing a note, and then I sang the third against that, the major third against that note, and then I made the note a little stronger, and I realized that major third had a sensation for me. And it's not like a clear sensation. It shifts, it changes its label, but the sensation is always major third-ish. And I was like, wow, major thirds feel kind of happy or something. And then I thought, well, let me try some of the others. And then like perfect fifths felt sort of clean. Some of them were very unclear. I couldn't quite grasp what it was. But I realized there was something about the major scale, and there were these little sensations that needed to happen. And so I, at that point, decided to park Melodia. I was doing less Melodia stuff and started working on just a major scale, like singing like do, re, mi, fa, so, that sort of stuff, but using numbers, not using solfege. So like 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. And I'd started developing these little patterns, thinking like, well, maybe if I use these kinds of patterns, something will happen. And maybe if I hang out a little bit on these sorts of sounds, I can start recognizing sounds. And so something had started happening.
Were you able to recognize melodies then, like real melodies and real chords by ear quickly, or was it still difficult?
It was funny. So Melodia has fragments of melodies that it trains you in. And so some fragments that I was super familiar with, I could recognize in certain contexts in real music. So if I was like on a minor seventh chord and I got a 5 flat 7 1, I would go, yeah, I know that, or like a 3 2 1, I would know what that was. Okay. But because I was recognizing the fragment of melody, not the sensation of the individual notes.
Yeah.
So it was a funny, I don't know, like a funny kind of a chunk that I was recognizing at that point. Yeah. And so when I started doing this like sensation thing, it still didn't really change in real music, but something was getting a little bit, something was different. I was realizing something was different. And so I started thinking, well, I've got to develop this and I've got to like research this, create a course, do something, I don't know. And then of course I came across you. And I thought, damn it, this guy's done this thing already. And I remember I was working at one of the private schools, and it was evening already. It was about 8 o'clock at night, and I was practicing. The department's very quiet, and I was taking a break, and I was checking out like ear training stuff, and up pops you, Leonardo, and here's this ear training thing, and by South African standards, it was not cheap. And I'd also already spent like a lot of money over the years on ear training stuff, and I wasn't sure if I should invest in this thing. So I watched you had a half an hour video explaining the difference between interval methods and sensation-based things. And I watched the whole video, and at the end of it, I thought, you know what? If I don't do it now, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to try this. But this is it. This is the last thing I'm going to try. And so, yeah, I got your course and started working on the exercises. And there you were describing the sensations and things that I had already started discovering, but I had no idea, even though I discovered that like the major third had a sensation for me, I had no idea how to build on that and how important that actually was, what was really actually supposed to go on. And this is after like, I don't know, 15 years of really hard ear training, probably longer even, like 18, 19 years of really hard ear training and not getting anywhere. And then things started changing quite quickly in your as I was doing the training. I mean, like probably a month or two later, I was walking through a shopping center, and suddenly I knew, oh, there's the tonic. Like, oh, I know in that piece where the tonic is, and oh wait, I can hear the chords. Oh my word! And I actually know what that melody thing is that's going on there, and that experience just kept getting more and more, and to the point that now, like, simple pop stuff is really easy. It's like almost instantly I can, if I just put my attention to what is that, I can like transcribe it pretty much immediately. And I mean, I'm still working through your course at this point, as you know, I think. But yeah, a lot of things have become possible. My improvising has changed completely. So I can now choose. I can improvise via theory. I can throw a logical idea at the piano and go, okay, I'm going to play a run that uses the scale. And then I can switch it off and go, okay, let's hear what that run sounds like when I do that, and not pre-hear it. And I can pre-hear melodies and improvise according to them. And jazz harmony is hard. It's there's a lot of key changes, a lot of things that happen, and it happens fast. And even with the most, I think probably by unit 3 of your stuff, I'd already noticed that change had happened. Like I was already able to play melodically rather than play by theory, which is really great. So I'm super grateful to you, by the way, in case you don't know that.
Yeah, great. Thank you. That means a lot. I mean, this story is crazy. So you're basically saying that you now something started to shift, and gradually you develop the ability to basically hear something in your head and improvise it on the instrument in real time. Or also, I guess that's what happened to me. Like maybe if I do a fast run, sorry, I don't hear every note, but I know the note I want to land on. I hear the note I want to land on, or the ending of the phrase, or the start of the phrase. Is that something that happens to you?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And in different amounts. It's like your brain is combining the things. It's combining your scale knowledge and whatever. But it's like the priority has shifted. Instead of the theory knowledge being the main driver, it's actually the audio knowledge. And actually, if I think of Malcolm Bruff again, just a musician whose brain is driven orally, not driven by theory. Many times in his concerts, he'll improvise, and he also kind of grew up in a churchy Christian church type situation, so he knows how to play like 4-part harmony stuff. And I remember being so amazed at how he would sit and play, improvising things that change keys and do all sorts of things in these kind of chord movements. And thinking, how is he hearing these chords up front and improvising like that way so well, so quickly? And now, like I can sit down and I can play, start somewhere, listen to what I'm doing, and know, like, okay, I want this chord next. And it's still within limits. I mean, like there are key changes and things that I can't access yet. But I know when I'm hearing a secondary dominant or a tritone substitution or I'm going to chord 6. So like I know ahead of time, so I can on the fly construct a chord progression and improvise over it at the same time and know that that's what I'm hearing, which is, I mean, that's like accessing the stuff that was in my mind and building the channel, the connecting thing.
I think there's been a transition, right? So
Absolutely.
Before this was a little bit more mechanical and like less of a flow experience. That's how I feel, at least after working out this stuff. And so does that? It's kind of the same for you, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely more mathematical, and I think even the longer I try to work on music, it became more mathematical because that was safe. It's like a safe place to play music from because you know that the maths is right and you're secure in that. And it's not so safe to not play that way. And even though, I mean, like at some points, it's like the inner musician just has to come out. So I've had gigs even in the period before the ear training, before your ear training, where I would be playing and something would come into place and it's almost like you're not there. You're not really playing the instrument. Something else is playing the instrument. And that state of being is the best state of being. And probably the most important shift is that when I'm playing from this perspective with this ear training, that state of being is very close all the time, if not the way I'm playing. So I can get there pretty much. I mean, my Alexander technique training has added to that because that's helped stop any habitual thinking, which is usually the theoretical mathematical thinking. I know how to recognize that and get in its way and basically let go of it instantly. but you need something to replace it with. Otherwise, you're just going to sit and look at the instrument and wonder what you should play next. And what's happened is I can stop the habitual theoretical thinking, notice it even before it's acted out, stop it, and then I can let the other stuff come through and go, what am I really hearing? And then I know what I'm really hearing, and I can actually access it. And like the 9 times out of 10 it's wrong, now it's like 9 times out of 10 it's right. I might make a mistake, but the mistakes are interesting now more than right or wrong.
Yeah, I'm curious to know. You're just saying I can choose now, right? I can choose either the theoretical and logical approach or the intuitive and like feeling based, where I just feel and imagine music and I play it. So, what's the advantage, do you think, about the theoretical, if there is any advantage? Because in my experience, I tried to like kill that side as much as I could, because that was like the main approach for me, and it was like a disease, really. So,
well, I think there's a hierarchy in the thinking. I think the feeling based stuff should come first, because that's got to do with I'm in this space, I'm in this moment, I'm with these musicians or by myself, with that audience or no audience, in this temperature. You being in the space now is going to be related to the feeling based thing. And that's going to be the most honest thing. And that's going to be what's going to connect with people the most. But the next level down of the hierarchy is being able to understand what that feeling is in a way that gives you access to it. Like, it's like in the solfege, understanding, oh, I'm hearing so I know where that is on my instrument. That doesn't mean that you're thinking I need to play so and then you look for so. It means that you first feel this note and then you know what it is. So it's like putting it in the right relationship. And that's the one place that I think it's really cool. It's also cool, the theory, mathematical stuff is also cool if you have the aural ability to throw a theoretical idea, a logical, rational idea at yourself and see how it sounds for you before you play it. Like, if you're able to do that, if you're able to go like, okay, I'm hearing chord 3. What if it wasn't? What if it was chord 1 in inversion? And then if you can do that in your mind, it's like, it's really cool, because then you can go, actually, I prefer that, which is great. Like, if you're writing music, you don't need to be able to sit down to do it. And sometimes you need to upset the apple cart a little bit. You need to mess yourself up because you're just playing what you know. So sometimes you need to throw something theoretical into a moment and go, what happens if I do this? And then you do it, and then you see how you respond. So you can upset yourself in interesting ways, which then gives you new responses and new ways of creating. So I think it's the rational stuff's important, but it mustn't it mustn't be the horse. Must be in the back of the apple cart somewhere.
Yeah, and definitely that makes a lot of sense, because you're saying that basically once your feeling based aural stuff is there, that can like feed into the theoretical part and the logical part, and they can interact together and expand your capabilities even more. I think the best musicians we all admire are built like that. They have the feeling stuff, which is the hard part to acquire, I think, and the theoretic stuff there too, and these two sides work together, and that's great. It's a great, yeah. I definitely agree with your perspective here. Okay, so the next question is tied to the topic we are discussing. What led you to choose the usual ear method for your university teaching?
Yeah. Okay. So obviously the whole journey that I'd been through in ear training, and the many years of spending many hours and lots of money and lots of practice and working with a lot of students over the years, seeing, and not as an aural teacher, just as a piano coach. They actually call it a piano coach over here. And seeing that people want to develop musically, and they actually want to be able to play basically the stuff they listen to on the radio. Most people just want to do that. Very few come in and say, I want to be a concert pianist. I think in the entire time I've taught over 20 years now, is like I haven't had anybody. I've had people who want to be serious jazz pianists. I've taught some of those, but probably not more than like, I don't know, 10 that have been really serious enough to actually really want to do it in 20 years. So I was like, okay, why is this? And then when the aural skills that I'd been developing through your course and the rhythmic practice I'd been doing for myself based on the stuff I'd been working on had made such a big change in my own development, I thought this is like fundamental. Plus, I know from the years of talking to musicians from all over the world, there are institutions in the world where, like one of the Cuban institutions, I can't remember the name now, but apparently their first year, all they do is solfege training and percussion training. Like that's it. You come in, you're already playing your instrument at a really high level. And they say, good, now you're not allowed to play your instrument in class for a year. All you're doing is solfege and you're working on your rhythm. That's all you're doing. And it's made so much sense to me because I learn music differently now. Like I learn music faster. It sits in my mind quicker. It takes less effort to do that. And when the university approached me, I mean, they approached me very last minute and said, we need an aural teacher. We've had a crisis. We know that you've spent, the head of music knows a bit about my musical journey. And he was actually one of my mentors when I did the masters there. And so he knows how hard I'd worked on aural. So he thought, well, this guy knows aural. He'll probably be able to help us out. And I was only teaching, they've got 4 years of aural. They have a foundation year, first year, second year, and third year. And so I was teaching the end of the third year stuff and the foundation end of that year's stuff. And I had a look at the syllabus and I recognized that syllabus as like basic interval training, the same sort of stuff with rhythm, expecting students to transcribe things, 2-part melodies, things like that, chord progressions, but realizing as I looked at like what their course outline looked like that there wasn't material to actually teach that. So I was very curious to see like if I walk in and I do this with the students, how are they going to be? Are they going to be able to actually do any of the things that it says they can do according to this course outline? And I found that if I played the exercises as like singular entities, isolated major, minor chords, isolated intervals, you would get a couple other people in the class, like they've developed the strategies, they can do it, especially the third years. The third years had those strategies. But if I said to them, like, find the tonic, here's a piece of music, here's a pop song, find the tonic, pretty much nobody in the class could do that. Then I said to them, okay, I'm going to work on something, here's a rhythm thing, can you think of it this way? They couldn't do it. There was like serious stuff missing from the basic ability to audiate rhythm and pitch. That's what it boiled down to. And that was one of the big like, okay, I've got to do it differently than what I'm seeing over here. And the best method for doing it differently is your method, I thought. Or I'd have to bastardize it somehow and copy your method and create exercises like your method, and create rhythm stuff and whatever. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to try to see what happens if I share the way Leonardo thinks about these things. I was trying to be ethical about it, so I wasn't like sharing your sound files or anything with the students. But I was trying to guide them in the right direction. Like, okay, no, you need to perceive a tonic. Let's just work on you perceiving a tonic. Let's see what happens if we do that. And I saw quite quickly that the foundation students particularly, probably because they hadn't been trained yet, they developed these skills a little quicker than the third years. But all of them thought it was important. But there was obviously a restriction. Like I needed to get these students to practice, and I'm not giving them resources to practice with. I'm telling them they got to go practice with their friends, and this is what's important. This is how you need to practice and all of that. But I thought it was really, really, really important because I couldn't teach aural in the way that I'd been taught aural or according to the course outline that I'd seen there. So I hope that answers that question. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So basically, we ended up collaborating with Vitz University, where they have now all of the students from the foundation to the third year, right, have access to our method and our material. And Daniel is teaching basically the method with the help of the resources that are included in the course. It started when it started, like when you started teaching, like the foundation.
Well, our year cycle is different than a lot of the world. So we start our year cycle in January, and I approached you. I think it was September. It was about September last year. Took a long time to negotiate with Vitz to figure out how we were going to do it, but we finally came to complete agreements and all of that. And then by January, it had been agreed, and we were going to use your course, and we are going to use my rhythm training stuff, and I was going to update it to match their course outline because, of course, it's a university and they have restrictions. Like you can't just come in and change a course without getting the right permissions and things. So it had to fit into the university's structure overall, which luckily your stuff did, and I had to adapt stuff to make sure, one has to add in things to make sure it works. And then the students, we did a baseline test on all the students because we got permission from Vitz to do a study, and we thought the best thing to do is see where they're actually at. And we started in February. The students started class in mid-February, and we took about 2 weeks and got everybody tested and started with some very basic reframing ideas just to help the students make a shift, particularly those who'd already been trained for 2-3 years in another way. And then the students got access to the course, and they've had access, I think, since about early March. Yeah, and it's been really interesting to see how things are developing, actually.
Would you like to talk a little bit about the students? What you've seen with the students? How many are you currently working with? What their general level was before starting the training, so at the baseline test, and so how long have they been using the method so far? What you saw in general? So,
yeah, look, we need to go and do like a deep, in-depth analysis of all of the tests that we've done. So we just did this sort of a superficial initial analysis and got the levels of the students, as you know. So roughly speaking, there was sort of an inverse bell curve, seemed to be the best way to describe it. It looked exactly the same across all the years, from foundation to third year. We had students who absolutely have none of the skills. You can play a melody for them. I'd say probably like 95, if not more % of the students could memorize the melodies and sing them back pretty accurately, if not completely accurately. So there was definitely evidence of good musical memory, that they are musicians that do practice and do play, and that they are actually, this part of the brain has developed very well. But they had no idea what it was that they were singing back. So we had these sort of two groups. We had one group who has no idea, and then another group who has very much an idea. They can tell you, that was so, and that was la, and that was do, and whatever. But that group has no idea how they're doing that. And we saw the same thing when we did chords. So we would play basic chord progressions. The majority of the students, 1-4-5 chords, couldn't transcribe chord 1-4-5. Sometimes chord 6 would be thrown in. Some of them had developed some strategy to be able to do that a little bit. But if we're looking at levels, they'd be sort of at a level 0 or a level 1. And then there was another group of students, which was now a much smaller group, but they could do more advanced. So they'd be like level 6, 7, 8 in being able to transcribe chord progressions. And not chord qualities. We didn't bother checking out chord qualities, just chord progressions that have different chord qualities in them. And obviously the students were expected to say, oh, it's chord 6 minor, and it's chord. So the chord qualities were there, but they were more real music examples than anything else. So there was this massive gap between these students who can't do anything, and then these students who can do things and they have no idea how they're doing it, and they don't know how to improve doing what they're doing. And there's nobody in between, which is bizarre, especially if you've got a third-year student and they've had 3 years of aural training, and the third-year classes amounts or ratios look the same as the foundation classes ratios. And this is a pretty big group we've tested. About 64 students, if I remember right, we have in the total baseline test.
Yeah.
So yeah, that it was surprising, but also kind of expected based on what I'd seen in the course outline. Of course, you don't know until you actually check it out and you go, oh, right, okay, this is the real thing. Which is why, yeah, we want to get into the data and test them again later on and see how have things changed, have things changed, what's going on with the students really.
So, given that you're teaching there, basically it's a couple of months, right? That you're teaching students.
Yeah.
So it's super early. Like 2 months is like almost nothing in the ear training learning process. So, but what kind of changes or progress have you noticed?
Yeah, so there have been very interesting things already. I would like to say as expected, but again, we don't know how things would perform because you don't know what the situation is that you're stepping into. And there have been some real obstacles. Particularly, I'd say, with the students who've had aural training at the university before. The obstacles are not quite the same with the first years and the foundation students that I'm working with. Particularly, the students don't seem to realize how much aural training will change their musical journey and what a change in their lives it'll mean. Once you have really good aural skills, like you have to practice your pieces to play them in the exams. Well, what if you could spend less time practicing your piece because your brain is absorbing the piece better, and because it's absorbing the sounds well, your fingers are organized better on whatever it is that you're playing because you're not thinking about your fingers as hard because your brain's doing the thing that it needs to. And I've tried to explain this to the students from numerous perspectives in different ways, but I also know from experience that like you can't explain this. You can only understand it when it happens to you, and you go, "Oh, wow! I'm learning music differently than I thought possible." So I've had this obstacle that students are not necessarily practicing, and I've had to do a couple of things to really motivate them to practice. And I've had to start doing like one-to-one sessions with those who are starting to think maybe this is important, maybe I should practice, and checking out how they're practicing, how they're working on stuff. Again, not interpreting necessarily your videos correctly or even watching videos through, which becomes very clear that like they're not engaging with the material 100%. But the second I get them to do that, and like with the people who've come to see me one-to-one and those who've been practicing a little bit more consistently, the changes have been very quick and actually phenomenal. I mean, I had a student from the foundation class yesterday who said in the last week he was walking around listening to stuff, and he's like, I know how to find the tonic. I can find the tonic in the pieces of music, and then I can find chord 1. And I know where chord 1 is definitely, and I can almost find all of the other chords too, depending on what I'm listening to. But like a lot of the stuff, I can kind of find the chords, and then I can go to the piano and I can already start finding them. And this is a student that when we first started, he couldn't sing a major scale properly, really. He was struggling with that and had to learn how to do that very quickly. And when I asked, like, how long have you actually really been practicing for? How long have you really been practicing? You've had the material for over 2 months now. How long have you really been practicing for? And he laughed and he said, well, maybe a month. Maybe a month. And I was like, wow. And this, like, this class is working on unit 1 material. They're not working on any of the other units. And that quickly, they're starting to show results. And I'm seeing that in the other years as well. But again, like, the students there are possibly things going on, like they might be overwhelmed. They have a lot of university work. Aural has never been pushed as a subject that they are taught is important. And they don't understand where it fits into their general musicianship. So when somebody new comes in and says, listen, this is really important, you need to do this, they go, yeah, every lecture says this. It says my subject is really important. And every lecturer says you've got to do this, and they're all giving us marks. And so it's been really interesting, but there are definitely changes starting to show up. And from the students who are sort of the worst, like I had students who were practically in tears the first time I publicly said to them, okay, let's test the skill. Let's see what you're thinking. And they were so terrified, firstly, to be seen as wrong in front of their peers, believing that they can't do it, that there's no way, overwhelmed by previous strategies of things, which is the number one thing that I have to engage with and help them decipher and get rid of. To students who now are like eager to be tested in that way and to show, yes, I've actually got these skills now. And obviously, the more advanced students, the students who already had the skills developed but don't know how they had those skills, those students have been relaxing. And they'd be like, well, we don't really need to practice because we can already do this stuff. And what's shown up in the last 2 weeks is now, like, the basic students have progressed. And the basic students can now find the tonic very easily. And the basic students can now find the major scale easily. And they can identify chord 1 quite easily. And they're now starting to be able to identify like chord 1, 4, 5, and 6 relatively accurately. And the advanced students who were maybe very good at melody stuff, but weren't working on the chord progressions and still haven't started practicing, they're suddenly getting stuff wrong, where the advanced students are getting things right. Like I had one of those advanced students get 2 chords right out of 15 chords. And one of the worst students who started out getting like 13 out of 15 chords right.
Wow, that's
These
great.
2 people in the same class had the same amount of time, the same training. And the one was like, could not pitch match accurately, couldn't sing the 7th degree of a scale properly, and has changed that much in a very, very short space of time. So I'm starting to see, and maybe this is just bias, I don't know, but I'm starting to see some of the advanced students looking at the beginner students going like, okay, all right, maybe I need to start working on this stuff, because clearly they're getting better, and I was always much better than them. And
That's motivational stuff. When you see someone like passing by you at 100 miles an hour, it's like you start running too, man.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also like another interesting correlation, which we need to verify, obviously, with the data. But it looks like at this point that the best performers at the university also have the best aural skills. It looks like there's a direct correlation between that. And we're doing the study to kind of see if that's true or not. It'll be super fascinating if it is. I mean, that would kind of case proven. This subject's important.
Yeah, definitely so. And we will have more to share about it in the upcoming months. But an important thing that you touched upon, and I think it's essential that we talk about it, because it's one of the most important and misunderstood topics, is like ideas. So your thought about the thinking strategies. Please expand on the thinking strategies. What you see, if thinking strategies really make a difference, if thinking strategies are more important even than the exercises you practice. So what do you think about this stuff? I'm curious to know.
I think it's more than just thinking strategy. I think it's like we're in a funny time where people's attention is messed up. And people don't know how to pay attention. They don't know what to pay attention to. Our lives are like directed towards screens, small screens, big screens. We're used to getting things kind of instantly. And we're also starting to move more and more towards a place where we accept what people say without first registering in ourselves how that thing lands. Like when you say that thing, what's happening to me, not in my thinking, like not in my thoughts, but actually in me physically or in my whole experience. So it's like we've narrowed our experiences. And so overwhelmingly, in the beginning, and that's probably why it's taken so long to get the students moving, I have had to spend a lot of time getting them just to notice that they are having an experience, and that the fact that they're having an experience is important enough because that's what you're going to learn. And then once you're having an experience, you need to direct yourself towards what is important in that experience to notice, because there they also don't know what to notice.
What do you mean by experience? Can you expand on that?
Everything that you are aware of, that you can be aware of in the moment, like the way the temperature feels, and touch, and the clothing on you, and the way a sound is in your ear, and the way movement feels, and like all of that stuff. They're so used to not engaging with that stuff. They will engage with their thoughts in judgmental ways, logical thinking.
So would it be accurate if I say that it's like we are as humans losing touch with the feelings and sensation world? That's what you're saying. Is it the same thing, sort of?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just this group of people, but it seems to be something like that is going on. And again, like I'm not a scientist about that, but that was the first thing that I really struggled with this large group of people. And then that's coupled with thinking strategies that they've developed in the past to cope with difficult moments. Like I'm getting marks for this oral thing, and I have to have a thinking strategy in order to do it. So one of the students, for instance, said that he tries to analyze everything according to cadences because he's pretty good at cadences. So he can recognize a perfect cadence and a plagal cadence and an interrupted cadence and all of those cadences. So he's cool with that. But then he tries to apply that in real music examples in order to figure out, like, okay, was that a 3 to a 6 chord? Because maybe that's like a perfect cadence relationship or something like that. And obviously is failing, really properly failing, and not able to do anything with that. Or the most common, I mean, this is going to be probably common across the board. Like people will, when they do pay attention to their sensation, let's say they're trying to do one of your melodic dictation exercises, and you change the octaves. And we're talking like really simple, like do, re, mi, but you play it in a different octave. Then they'll try to sing it in that top octave. And because it's high, they're thinking actually in an intervallic way, but they don't realize. And they don't realize they're actually singing the same note in relation to the scale. They switch off the ability to recognize the sensation that they actually can recognize. Like if you keep it all in one octave, they can recognize it quite easily. But you change the octave and then they kind of aren't able to do it. And I have to physically instruct them, like, don't pay attention to what your voice is doing. Just go back to paying attention to the way this note feels in terms of resolution to where the tonic might be. Like, where would you resolve the note? How would you do that? What's happening with that? And it's hard for them. And then as soon as they hear something that they can't recognize, so they'll get into a groove, they recognize 3, 4, 5 notes in a row. And as soon as they hit a moment that they can't recognize the note, they jump back into their old thinking strategies. So like, what interval was that? Or if I think in terms of the major scale, the previous note was mi. I know that was right. So was this a step down or a jump down? Is it an arpeggio? And they're immediately back in their old ways of thinking. And it's like I have to relentlessly go, no, stop. Stop thinking that way. Stop. And then they're like, no, okay, I've stopped. And then they'll keep making the same mistake 5, 6, 7 times in a row. And then eventually they'll go past that and they'll go, okay, I recognize now when I go to the other thinking strategy. So that's a battle won.
Okay, so basically, you're saying that the one of the problem is that you're seeing that they have maybe acquired a particular thinking strategy because they trained in a specific way before they started like teaching, before you started teaching them, and they are by default reverting to that strategy, even though we have a specific thinking strategy to adopt. For example, in the case of the melodic dictation, the first thinking strategy, the first step is like just thinking the scale from the note or singing the scale from the target note down or up until you reach the tonic. And this is, I talk about this in one of my recent videos. And so you're basically seeing that there is a group of people that are having a hard time like defaulting to this thinking strategy.
Yeah, I mean, if you take that exact example you're giving now, it's like the vast majority of them will struggle with this at first. They won't even go to the thinking strategy of like singing down. They will first and foremost panic because they have to give the name of the note, and so they'll immediately just say what they think it is. So the first thinking strategy is guess. That one shows up all the time, which is terrible, you know. And like if you're dealing with only 3 notes, well, I mean, you have a 33% chance of being right. So, okay, you could guess, maybe, fine. And then when you manage to get them to stop guessing, then the next thing that is like, just sing the note, just match that pitch, just match the pitch of what you're doing. Then they'll match the pitch, and then at the moment of matching the pitch, they'll give it a label straight away. They'll go, oh, it's do. So without doing anything else, so their brain is actually labeling something because they're panicking, because they think they need to give it an answer. So they won't let themselves have the experience of just matching the pitch. That's too much. And when you finally get past that, then often what they'll do is they'll match the pitch and then they'll sing the tonic. And then they'll work the scale up to the note instead of working the scale down to the note. And then you have to go, no, okay, whoa. When you sing the tonic and you try sing up to the note, you're just doing interval singing again. You're back at square one. You can't do that. You got to stop doing that. And then they'll do that over and over again.
In the bass line, we saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we saw that a lot of them had the default thinking strategy was solfege, but in intervals. So they weren't like really focusing on the scale. They were basically thinking intervals down to the tonic, but it was still an intervallic thinking strategy. Am I correct?
Right. And it's what essentially went wrong with my early ear training at the university. It was like the only thing that's important about the solfege is the label. There's nothing else. We're just randomly calling these things these labels. Like we might as well call it C# and D and F and whatever, you know. So it had nothing to do with the experience of the thing. Like, if you think of a fruit, you think of an apple. This is an analogy I've been using. It's like there's an experience you've had related to apple. So when you say apple, you can recall the experience. You can recall, if you want to, the color of the apple that you're imagining. You can play with that experience. You can change the color. You can recall the way the apple tastes. Is it a powdery apple? Is it a crunchy apple? Is it juicy? You can recall that because you've had those experiences. So apple means something to you. Whereas la or mi or do is literally just a label, which only has a theoretical equivalent. It just means something in terms of a scale, or it's a place on a piano. So it doesn't have a sound experience related to it. It's only a theoretical or a technical experience related to it. And I think if one makes that shift, which is what throws the students, is that they think they've got to go back to this intervallic thinking because that's the only sound experience they've got to hang on to.
Yeah, makes sense. And the method is built in a way in which it gives you, it forces you to have the experience so that you can associate the sensation and that the feeling you experience to the scale degree, the solfege syllable, or whatever you want to use, or the piano note, or the guitar pattern that's in your head.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is the key. It's not like the label, that the fact that you're doing solfege doesn't really make a difference if you still think in a way that doesn't allow you to have the experience, as Daniel is saying. So this is like I think this summarizes your concept, the concept you were sharing. From the comments I'm receiving on YouTube, it seems like many people are not understanding this. So that's why I wanted to clarify it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share about this, about the students and what you're seeing there. It's just a couple of months, so it's like very early. We'll have more to share later on in the upcoming months. But if there's anything else, please do.
Well, I suppose there's one smaller thing which I think is going to become a big deal. In the few students who are practicing and who are getting these things right, and the number of students went from maybe like 20% of the class was maybe practicing and 80% was really not. And at this point, we're probably at about 50 to 60% are starting to practice, and maybe about 40% are not practicing yet. But of those that started practicing early on, I am seeing a kind of a confidence or an excitement, or there is something that is awakening in them a little bit. And like I was expecting that something like that would happen. I was hoping that something like that would happen, because that was my experience. I was like, yes, I can do the thing. I knew it was possible. I knew my first teachers were wrong when they said, you can't. You either you can or you can't, and you're one of those that can't. And I was like, yeah, well, screw you, because now I can. Now I can stand with a piece of music and I can read the notes and I can imagine them. So screw you, I can do it. And I'm starting to see that same thing awakening in the students, and like a little bit of excitement that there's something. And I really hope that grows. I hope that what I'm seeing turns into a big deal.
I think that if I can like try to imagine how I felt when I started to be able to do this stuff, and I started that I was much worse than your situation. I mean, I wasn't able to identify a major third interval from a minor one. I wasn't able to match pitch. So, I mean, you were like way beyond my level when you started this type of training. In myself, when I went through the transition, let's say, I just felt more confident, because you start feeling like you are a musician, like you start feeling like, okay, I deserve to be called a musician right now, because I have the skills that make that I think that being a musician versus not being a musician is just what's happening. If you can really imagine music, if you can really like think in music, then you are a musician. If you can't, and you're just typing notes on the instrument, you can be a virtuoso, but you're not fully a musician. That's at least that's how I felt. And so the moment I recognized, I can be good at this, I can be a musician. And that was like there's a kind of an identity shift, I think, that's happening for some people. That was in my case. I think from what you're describing, that was also your case, and probably what's happening also to the students that you are describing here. So that's beautiful. I mean, it's like
yeah. I mean, in my case, I worked really hard to be a musician and did all the things that musicians do. Practice many hours a day, stay up late, don't have a social life, do the gigs, do the horrible gigs that you don't want to do. all that stuff. And I was like, okay, this is what it means to be a musician, but the connection is not there. And with how hard I'm working at stuff, I should be better. I should be better. I should be better than what I'm capable of playing with the amount of work that I'm putting in. And it's really this shift is the thing that's making the difference, has in the recent years been making the difference and keeps making the difference. And if I can do that, if you and I can actually do that, I suppose, because it means your course for the students, that's an amazing gift to the students. It's also an amazing gift to the music industry, and actually the planet, because when you perceive sound like this, it's like you haven't really seen colors before. You've kind of been living in a black and white world somehow, and then or like you've never had a good curry. You've always had a bad curry, or every curry you've ever had just tasted the same. And then one day somebody unlocked your taste buds and you went, wow, this is incredible. All those flavors, what's going on? My brain has just exploded. And I mean, if that's what you give the planet, what a beautiful thing. What a beautiful thing.
That's great. And I think this is the perfect like sentence to end our interview here. It was a great interview. It was full of very interesting stuff. I hope our followers and subscribers on YouTube like this. Let us know in the comments if you do. Thank you, Dan, and see you soon.
Cool. Pleasure.
All right. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. If you want to learn more about our full method, just check out the link in the description below. And if you haven't seen it yet, make sure to watch this other video where I walk you through a few exercises to help you recognize notes by ear intuitively. Plus, I'll show you the best thinking strategies to adopt and what to avoid. Don't miss it.